So I've decided to make a little video here that details my traveling, basically from New Year's Eve 2011 until now, where I currently am today, close to New Year's Eve 2013. And so my travels start off, I have been in Guatemala with my little brother Rob and his to-be wife Rihanna in Antigua, Guatemala, for New Year's. And so I'd been there traveling with them for a few weeks. Then on New Year's Eve, I drove, or took the bus actually, from Antigua down to San Salvador, where I was working at Escuela Americana. I watched the fireworks with my friend Greg Mazio on the roof of the middle school building at EA. And then basically what happened was I finished up the semester there. My friend Adam gave me a pass that allowed me to jump all around the world for free. So at the end of the year, at the end of the school year, I jumped back to Colorado. This is Canyon City, my hometown. And then the next day, the very next day after I landed, I jumped down to Lima, Peru, so I could go meet up with some friends and do some traveling in Peru. The next day, so I stayed one night in Peru right next to the airport. The next night, I bought a cheap flight. I couldn't use my pass, but I bought a cheap flight and flew to Cusco. And then from Cusco, we went to Machu Picchu and spent some time with my friends Tracy and Jessica at Machu Picchu, near Cusco there in Aguas Calientes. And then Jessica left, and Tracy and I took a long bus ride down to Puno, where Lake Titicaca is. Tracy and I did a little lake tour and saw some floating reed houses. And then I took Tracy to the airport, and then I continued traveling in Peru and went and saw my good friend Jorge in his little town of Moquegua, and then Arequipa, and we went to the Colca Canyon and saw some condors. I got to watch the condors fly, which was unreal. Then Jorge had to go back to work, and so I took a long 24-hour bus ride up Peru there from Arequipa back up to Miraflores, Lima, and I really like Miraflores. It's one of my favorite cities in the world. Anyway, then I was feeling pretty done with Peru. Remember, I had a pass to let me fly for free anywhere. So I flew up and spent a day in Houston. Not exactly my favorite day, but I was basically just waiting on flights. And so I went to the mall. Here I am at George Bush International Airport. And then from there in Houston, I flew to Amsterdam. And I spent a nice little week in Amsterdam, cruising around, see the Van Gogh Museum, doing the canal tours, checking out the green, red, and yellow light district. And then from there, I jumped back home to the States. I actually stopped in London and then Washington, D.C. before arriving back home in Colorado. From there, I drove with my mom, my dad, my grandmother, and my aunt up to Montana. On the way up, we stopped in Yellowstone because we're going to Big Sky, Montana, where my little brother Rob married his current wife, Rihanna, on the top of the Lone Peak there at Big Sky. Then after that, we drove back down once again through Yellowstone. Got to stop in Yellowstone twice, got to see Old Faithful. And I spent some time in Canyon City again. And I basically applied for a bunch of visas. Visas to China, India, Brazil, where else? I think those are the big three. And then while I was waiting for visas, I didn't have my passport, and so I did some trips within the United States. The first of which was Detroit. Went and saw my good friend John Roach and another good friend Andrea Petz there in Michigan. We cruised all over, went to a baseball game, went to some museums. After that, I had a hard time getting out of Detroit because flights were full, but after that I jumped to Los Angeles and went and saw some good friends there. I don't show it on my map, but I actually rented a car and drove up to the Redwoods and drove up Highway 1 as well. Then I was flying for free, so I decided to jump back home, check and see if my passport had come with my visas to China, Brazil, and India. It had not, so I figured, what the heck? I'm going to go ahead and jump on out to Hawaii. So I flew out to the big island of Hawaii, to Hilo, exactly. When I was in Hilo, this amazing couch surfer loaned me his car. I used it to drive around the island, jumped off at South Point, all of that stuff. Then I heard back and found out that my visas were there, so I flew back to Canyon City, spent one night, maybe two more nights with my parents, and then I jetted off. And so first I flew from Colorado Springs to San Francisco, one of my favorite cities in the world. And so I spent a single day in San Francisco because I could do it since I was flying for free. And then I flew from San Fran down to DF, the Distrito Federal in Mexico City. In Mexico City, once again, I couch surfed. And so I spent some time just cruising around with this girl and her family. And they fed me and showed me their favorite taco shops and where to go. And then from there, I jumped over to the Yucatan Peninsula, to Playa del Carmen, where my good friend Greg Mazio's brother Joe put me up for a couple days, and I really appreciated that. Got to see some ruins and, go see the cenotes and all of that. Then it was time for me to finish up my master's degree, so I jumped back down to San Salvador, El Salvador, and finished my Framingham class, last one. Took 2 weeks there, And then I jumped off. And so Adam came and met me in Los Angeles. Then we flew from there to San Francisco, and from San Francisco to Seoul. He stayed with me and we partied for 4 nights in Seoul. Then I went down south further into Korea and saw Andrea Pets again. And then I went back to Seoul and jumped down to Singapore. In Singapore, I was only there for 4 days. It was kind of expensive, and I just wanted to go see some other stuff. So then I hopped on buses and I started traveling north, and so I traveled overland on public buses from Singapore, first to Kuala Lumpur, and I spent about 4 days there in Kuala Lumpur, seeing museums, once again, just kind of traveling along. From there I went to Penang and up in some beaches in the north, and from there I caught some trains into Thailand. My cousins had told me about Hua Hin, which is a little beach town in Thailand, and so I went and spent some days on the beach in Hua Hin, which was great. From there I went up to Bangkok. I loved Bangkok. My cousin Leilani, I guess my second cousin Leilani, showed me all around, got to see Wat Po and the Grand Palace and the Golden Buddha. And then from there I went and marked another thing off of my bucket list, which was to see Angkor Wat in Cambodia. I actually spent 3 days in Siem Reap and then a couple more days in Phnom Penh before taking the bus back over to Thailand. When I took the bus back over, I had 2 nights in Bangkok, so I stayed again with my cousins Leilani and Malia, and then I booked a flight. I couldn't use my pass because there weren't United flights that went there, but I booked a flight on a discount carrier to fly to Nepal. Nepal was amazing, unreal mountains, super kind people. I really enjoyed Kathmandu. I was only there 10 days, which was way too short. Got to go see Everest. From there, I jumped down and met up with my good friend Mark Wiebers and his wife Chelsea in New Delhi, which was wild, wild, wild. Anyway, from there, we went on a little tour of India, and it was really great to have them with me because they, A, speak the language, and B, knew all the places to go. So we took a public bus down to Agra to see the Taj Mahal, which was unreal. Stayed there for 5 days just because, well, the Taj is an amazing thing to sit and look at. It's unreal, one of the best buildings I've ever seen in my life. And then we went to some other cities along the way, my favorite of which was Orcha. Really enjoyed it, just a small village, lots of temples and basically old ruins around. From there we took a long overnight train to Varanasi, which was, again, one of the more powerful cities I've ever been to. I got to float on the Ganga. I got to watch people doing cremations there. And that was the last stop on my international trip. From there, I flew first to Bombay and then to New York City. I originally had planned on flying from New York to Colorado, but while I was in the air, that flight had booked. And so remember, I was flying standby. So actually what I did was I flew across the country to San Francisco, where I got to have one last night in San Fran before heading home to Colorado. And so it was Christmas time. I actually landed back home in Colorado Springs at my little home airport of Colorado Springs, Colorado, on the 23rd of December 2012. And then what's cool is, by random chance, I ended up getting my same job back. So then what I did was January 3rd, I flew from Colorado back down to San Salvador, where I had been teaching, and resumed my position teaching. Now, while I was in San Salvador, I traveled all over the place. I mean, we'd go down to the beach all the time and here and there. But I did go to a new beach for spring break. I went to Playa Las Flores there in Sonsonate, which was awesome. Then I actually went back up to San Salvador, the capital, and then flew back up to the States. I had planned on going to work at the Cairo American College when I left El Salvador. And so Cairo American actually paid for me to go to a training, an IB training at St. Pete's Beach in Florida. So for a nice week over the summer, I got to spend a week on the beach in an awesome hotel learning about the IB. Then once that was done, I flew back up to Colorado. Got to do a bunch of fun things in Colorado. Got to go to Halloween in July and party with my brothers and friends, and it was just wonderful. Before heading to Egypt, though, I went out to see my good friend Eric Paulson get married, so I flew back out to Burbank. I actually drove down to San Diego for his wedding, but I don't show that on this map. And then from Burbank, from LAX, I flew directly to Cairo. So I flew all the way from LA around the world, first to Istanbul, had a short layover, and then to Cairo, to Mahdi, where the Cairo American College is. Now, if you pay attention to the news, you know there's a lot of unrest there. So the school offered an evacuation package, which I took. But before they flew me home, I had them drop me off in Amsterdam for a nice little 5-day stopover in Amsterdam, which was awesome. And then from Amsterdam, I flew on back home to Colorado, stopping in Chicago and then back down. Now, I got home just in time to go help with the 1,000-year flood that happened in northern Colorado, so I got to go help my grandmother dry her house out and make sure everything was all right. And then the rest of the time I was home, really, I spent time just at my parents' farm. This is Rainbow Park Dairy in Florence, Colorado. I really am infinitely thankful for the time I got to spend there. And then I got another job teaching abroad, this time with my friends Greg Mazio and Elaine Bailey in Saudi Arabia, where I'm currently employed with Dhahran High School. We live really close to Bahrain. In fact, there's a causeway. You'll see it in just a second. See that road across the water there? That's the causeway that leads to Bahrain. And so we drove over for a nice little day trip to Bahrain a couple weeks ago. And then now I'm on Christmas break, and so I flew from Saudi Arabia to Thailand, where I'm currently making this video. So I'm a little bored in my hotel before I go out. Anyway, so now I'm here for a job fair, and hopefully we'll find another job in another part of the world that I want to do. So that's a little summary, a quick little summary, 10 minutes, 11 minutes of what I've been doing recently. Hope you enjoyed it, and get out there and use those passports, people.